We here in America really are citizens of two different worlds, both our religious faith and that of the government. And today on Austin Faith Dialogue, we talk about ways of being in partnership and breaking down the walls between the two. That's Austin Faith Dialogue. Stay with us.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
We're glad you've joined us today on Austin Faith Dialogue. Our topic is charitable choice, but that term means so much more than we might think. And our two guests are here today to help us understand the term and the creative partnership that can happen between government and faith-based organizations. So first we have Don Willett, Director of Research and Special Projects in the Office of Governor George W. Bush. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
And Susan McCormick, you're Director of Community Life at Westlake Bible Church. Glad you're here too, Susan.
Thank you.
I like to always start by not assuming that people watching necessarily know the topic, much about the topic that we're talking about. And so charitable choice may really be an unfamiliar term for people. Don, you work with this all day. So perhaps you can help folks understand what that term means and where the whole notion of partnerships has come from.
Sure. The term really has a technical legal meaning. It's really a provision of the 96th Federal Welfare Overhaul. There's a section, it's a really landmark but little noticed but revolutionary section that really tries to encourage more partnerships between government and religious social ministries. The neat thing about charitable choice is that for the very first time there are very strong legal and practical protections built into that law, so that ministries don't have to, quote, secularize, unquote, themselves as a price of linking up with government. It's completely voluntary. Clients are not required to go to a religious program, but the programs themselves are not required to, for example, remove icons off the wall or remove symbols off the wall. They're not required to, conceal or compromise their distinct religious character, which is what motivates them to serve and to serve most effectively in the first place. It has a broader definition. People apply it broadly to all manner of collaborations between church and state. There is a legal narrow meaning, but it is applied broadly to a whole range of affiliations between church and state.
So the whole notion of partnership is really a national one then, from several years ago. And what has this partnership turned out to look like here in Texas? I know that the governor is really encouraging these church and state partnerships, if you will. Any particular way that our living this out is different here in Texas from other states?
Well, it's true. It is a signature priority of Governor Bush. In fact, it predates the passage of charitable choice in 1996. Back in 1995, there was a pretty well-publicized hassle that was endured by a really effective drug treatment program called Teen Challenge. And they were subject to a really overzealous government bureaucracy that was more interested in process than performance. And they were told, well, you may do it better than everybody else, but you don't do it the right way. And Governor Bush is very focused on bottom line and performance and results. Does it work? Are we getting bang for the buck? And there are a few things that bother him more than when we praise process over performance. So his interest really dates back to 95, kind of rescuing Teen Challenge. And I think he astutely recognized that while we may know about that episode of a heavy-handed, one-size-fits-all government, prescription, we happen to know about that one just by media reports. But how many other, Good Samaritans are being saddled with very inflexible, rigid regulations? How can we in our state be more friendly, more welcoming, more benevolent? So he formed a task force that met throughout 1996, and they released two landmark reports called Faith in Action. And there are a host of recommendations in that report that were eventually translated into two legislative packages in 1997, and then one more package in 1999, to really kind of clear away the underbrush that trips up and thwarts the work of effective social ministries in our state, so they can really play a front and center, indispensable role in combating different social ills.
And this sounds like such an exciting way for a congregation to be in ministry. So, Susan, in your particular church, in Westlake Bible Church, what has becoming involved in this initiative, this charitable choice, this partnership, what has it meant in general for you all?
I wouldn't say that we're actually involved yet, but it's part of our thinking because it is there. For example, we're in western Travis County, and the closest services of any kind, medical, legal, the one-stop services that are available to people throughout the city are a long way from anybody close to us. And many people think of western Travis County as being a generally affluent area, but there are areas where there are a number of people in need, and something we are talking about is perhaps housing a community service center there. So we could explore a partnership with the Department of Human Services, perhaps have a person in our building who would be the social worker, offer all kinds of things. We're not down that road yet, but because of Charitable Choice and the environment that that has created, this is a viable alternative for us to look at.
You say you're not down that road yet. So what do you anticipate the steps will be as you explore whether this works for you or not?
The most important thing is prayer and discerning what God is calling us to do as a congregation. That's going to be essential for any church or faith-based organization, because you must have that clear sense of calling and mission and stay true to that. Then if partnering with government is a fit because they can offer resources or personnel or training, then pursue that. But if it's not, it's not necessary to always partner with government to do what it is that God is calling a particular group to do.
You're right. That sounds like definitely the best way to begin. Now, suppose then, Don, that a particular congregation does decide that a partnership makes sense. What are the steps for a congregation to say, yes, we want to be involved in this initiative, this charitable choice? Is there an application form, or what exactly happens?
It really depends on what they want to do. If they want to offer welfare to work services, they would contract their local workforce development board or their local DHS office. If they want to offer addiction treatment, they would simply register their desire to do that with TCATA, the state agency that governs addiction treatment in our state. It really depends on what type of service they want to deliver. But there is a wide diversity of partnerships. Some are funded and very formal and contractual, where money changes hands. Others are very loose and more informal and more referral-based. There's really a diverse mix, and Susan's right. It really depends on where the heart of that ministry is and what their comfort level is. And frankly, there are some people who simply believe we want nothing to do with government. We think that shekels inevitably come with shackles. But they're much more willing to enter into some sort of informal, looser affiliation. So it really depends on, number one, the comfort level they have. How formalized does that partnership need to be in their mind? And number two, what they want to do. One thing, we did pass a law last session in 1999 that plants in every regional DHS office around the state, and there are 10 or 11 of those, a faith-based liaison whose full-time job will be to conduct outreach and oversee collaboration with ministries in that area.
Ooh, that sounds exciting, and I'm sure most people didn't know about that. So if a congregation, a faith-based group says, yes, we do want to be in partnership, there's money involved, technical assistance? What are some of the kinds of things that a group could receive?
Again, it depends on exactly what they want to do. But we get billions of dollars every year in Texas to govern our welfare to work programs. That money flows through local workforce development boards, and there's one here in Austin, the Capital Area Local Workforce Board, and they really oversee the vast majority of government-funded welfare to work activities. And there is a website, the TWC website, the Texas Workforce Commission, which is the head agency governing welfare delivery in our state. They have a new item on their website, I think it was new as of a couple of weeks ago, where willing ministries who want to step up and move, as I say, from the sideline to the front line, can kind of register their inclination to get involved, if they want to partner and link up with government in some way. They can get on the TWC website and kind of make that known, and say, here we are, here's what we want to do, how can we work together?
Now, the partnership idea sounds really good. It doesn't sound like there are too many drawbacks. But I wonder, since you, Susan, come from the perspective of a local church, are there problems that some people are having, objections, difficulties at the notion of a faith-based group working with the government, crossing a line that often in the United States is a real dividing line?
I've conducted a little informal poll of my own just with churches in our neighborhood and then some other churches that we're connected with. And of those that I talked with, about half, and I was talking with staff people who would be most likely to know something about Charitable Choice, about half of them had heard of it and the other half had no idea what it was about. As I explained it, some of them were initially quite cautious and would say, you know, I just don't know that we would want to consider that. Most of them, however, said that they thought that it bore looking into, that it should be at least examined. And I think that any faith-based organization should be thoughtful and thorough, know what's going to happen, know what the agreements are. And the successful ones that I've been reading about, it really comes down to relationships. If you can have public policy that says one thing, but it's that faith-based liaison in each region that you're dealing with, or the person at the Texas Workforce Commission, and those relationships that you build. And as you talk together, if you have the opportunity to brainstorm together, to design programs together, to implement and really have equal partnership, respect one another, respect what environment is bringing to that effort, then I think there is a great chance for success.
Now, one more question. We're coming up on our break here in just a minute. But I wonder if in your research you've noticed any difference in opinion about the benefit of this kind of partnership between, say, people who come from churches that have been involved in public policy and social action for a long time, and perhaps some of the evangelical groups that might not have.
I don't know if I could answer that question and give an informed answer. There just seems to be a lot of interest and enthusiasm. Those churches who have been involved probably already have informal relationships with different aspects of government.
So we hope that, at least through this program, we'll get people encouraged to talk about where God is leading them and what kind of ministry they should be involved in. So we'll come back here in a minute and we'll talk some more about the specifics and give people suggestions for further resources and all that. Thank you both for being here. And thank you for being with us for the first half of Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll be right back. We're glad you're here for Austin Faith Dialogue. We're talking today about Charitable Choice, a way for us in faith-based groups to partner with the government to deliver services. And our guests are Don Willett, who is Director of Research and Special Projects for the Office of the Governor, and Susan McCormick from Westlake Bible Church, on staff there as Director of Community Life. That's right. Now, before we left, we were talking about perhaps some of the pitfalls. But let me go back and ask a little bit about how Charitable Choice is being lived out in Texas. a little bit more about Governor Bush's interest. There are a lot of things that a governor could focus on, a lot of issues that need attention across a state as big as ours. Why do you think he's picked up on charitable choice as one that he really champions?
Sure. I think number one, because Governor Bush has a really earnest heart for the distressed in our state. He saw the hassles endured by this ministry, Teen Challenge, that I mentioned earlier, and thought, why are we hassling a program that's rescued tens of thousands of people from addiction because they have a torn shower curtain or some frayed carpet? How can we be about results and support what works? And how can we enlist the aid of every effective ally we can find in combating these different social problems? So he formed this task force, and they kind of surveyed the landscape, identified this barrier and that obstacle, and identified ways we can be a much more benevolent, welcoming state to these efforts. I mentioned that we passed a number of laws. We've passed law after law and issued executive order after executive order to aggressively take the side of these groups, to number one, do no harm, and kind of adopt the first law of medicine and not hamstring them with inflexible rules that are more about process and results. But number two, aside from doing no harm, how can we aggressively take their side, accentuate the positive? One example is a Good Samaritan bill we passed last session to benefit volunteer doctors, nurses, dentists, and other medical professionals who want to donate their care free of charge through nonprofit healthcare groups. How can we kind of encourage more of them? How can we encourage the noblest impulse of medicine and kind of woo them off the sideline without the risk of a bankrupting lawsuit? That involves no money changing hands, but it's a very tangible way we can remove a barrier and kind of stimulate additional care being given to Texans.
Now, the governor himself is Christian, as are the three of us. What do you know about any interfaith involvement in the whole charitable choice movement?
Right. There are examples of collaborations across the state involving, for example, Jewish family services. Governor Bush, again, is all about performance. And if there's a Muslim group, a Mormon group, a Methodist group who gets the job done, who really achieves the valid, public purpose of rescuing people from addiction or moving people from welfare to work or combating crime or curbing recidivism, if they work, we should applaud them, no matter what their background. And again, he's all about performance. And he's very deliberate in reaching out and making sure his message is inclusive and broad. He talks about enlisting the aid of churches and synagogues and mosques. So we need, again, enlist the aid of every effective and potent ally we can find.
It'll probably take all of us, that's right. Susan, let me ask you some of the same kind of question that I was just asking about the governor. There are a lot of things on local church staff that you could be involved in. Why has Charitable Choice particularly piqued your interest?
Well, it's more a matter of being Christ-like in the community. And I think that our congregation, like many congregations, has been unbalanced to the side of being more internally focused. And we have sensed God changing us to move us outside our walls, first to our immediate neighborhood, but also to the rest of the community.
Has there been anything in particular that's really caught your attention, anything you've read, anything you've heard that says, yes, this is where I want to invest my time?
Not yet. I was talking to Liz Seal, who was on the task force last week, and I told her I feel like I'm still at the stage where every rock I turn over, there are 10 more rocks to turn over, just to try to get to know the city. What is our city like? What are the needs? What are the hurting places in our city? And what are the resources that we have to bring that could help that? Where could we fit best?
And in the best sense, of course, that's always a spiritual journey when we begin asking those kinds of questions. I wonder if, as Charitable Choice continues to play itself out here in the state of Texas, if there's a way in which we might become a model program or a model state for the rest of the United States. Do you see places where unique programs are happening that the rest of the U.S. should pay attention to?
It really has happened a lot in Texas. We really are at the vanguard of this movement. It's a really hot, social policy topic, and we're kind of at the forefront of that movement. The Center for Public Justice, which is a nonprofit kind of social research organization in D.C., did a recent survey on state-by-state implementation of charitable choice, and Texas received the highest grade, a grade with a plus at the end of it because of the governor's leadership and the way we've aggressively moved to implement that and plant it firmly across the state. There are examples, though, of ministries that are being replicated and modeled elsewhere. One example is a thing we call the Interchange Freedom Initiative. Interchange is the boldest and grandest experiment ever attempted in criminal rehab anywhere in America. It is without peer, where we've invited Prison Fellowship, run by Watergate felon turned preacher Chuck Colson, and they come in and they control every waking moment of these inmates' lives. It's an 18-month pre-release program. It is a round-the-clock intensive regimen of religious education and training, followed by a really heavy dose of post-incarceration aftercare. Interchange is getting phenomenal results thus far, and we are going to clearly measure success or failure, but other states, Iowa and Kansas and others, have already launched their versions of Interchange. So there are a number of ministries in our state and laws we've passed that are being picked up and modeled elsewhere.
I suppose that some charitable choice might say, wait a minute, we in the United States have tried for so long to keep government out of our religious lives and our religious beliefs out of our participation in government, and here we are blurring the line, and that could be a very real possibility. How would you answer folks who have that kind of objection to charitable choice?
Well, charitable choice was very smartly tailored and fashioned. The law makes it very clear that clients are not required to be in a religious program. If they do object, and I think nationwide there have been, 2 examples where clients have objected to the religious tone and atmosphere of a program, but if that ever does happen, government is obliged legally to transfer that person to a secular program. There are restrictions on government where they, let me back up for a second. Government is forbidden from having a program become secularized or making them toe the government line and be faith devoid. We want to aggressively take the side of faith-based groups. But government, there are some protections in there for clients, where clients, again, it's completely voluntary. If there is an objection, they can transfer it to another program. And again, it's based on a principle of even-handedness and neutrality. There's a thread running through Charitable Choice that we want to treat religious providers no more favorably, but no less favorably than secular providers. How can we treat them with a degree of non-discrimination and welcome them on the same footing as anybody else? We're not going to give them preferential treatment, but we should allow them to compete based on results and based on merit like everybody else.
And with that encouragement then from the government, Susan, what do you hope happens, assuming Westlake Bible Church does decide to participate in a partnership, become a provider of services with the government support? What do you want to have happen in your congregation as a result of this work?
Well, I think our congregation could be transformed as much as the people that we are hoping to serve, because our following Christ is incomplete without serving those that he cared about, those in need. And I truly believe that materialism is as dehumanizing as poverty is, and that if we're just chasing the next car or vacation or designer dress, we are very impoverished of spirit, and that as we experience Christ living his life through us, sharing God's loving care with others the way he would have us to, that will truly be a fulfilling life. But my hopes go much beyond our congregation. I have great hopes that this could be a unifying factor in our city as we all focus on the needs of our neighbors who are in need. And no matter what our doctrinal statements are, it includes loving our neighbors. And we can come together around that. I think that if we can maximize the resources that every sector can bring to this situation, government bringing money and training and expertise and personnel, and churches bringing those wonderful transforming relationships and love and the gospel and relationship with God, accountability, spiritual instruction, and coming together for government to do what government does best, for church to do what church does best.
Truly
will help people.
transforming. You're right. You're right. Now, to help the process start, I understand that that the governor's office is going to provide some special help at an event this fall, perhaps for congregations that don't even know where to start. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. We've done a lot of what we can do on the government side to, again, remove obstacles and make Texas more benevolent and faith-friendly, to kind of clear the legal landscape, to make the climate more welcoming. But now we've discovered we need to really add another focus, which is, now that we've improved the atmosphere, what can we do to help improve the skill set, the tangible how-to skills of ministries who may be, just for the very first time, kind of dipping their toes into the human service field. They may have great passion and great energy and great desire to do the right thing, but they don't know how, for example, to write a grant proposal or how to write a business plan. So this will be a conference 2 days in October 2nd and 3rd, probably in Houston, to really marry their want-to with know-how and kind of equip them with the habits of effective charities.
And there's a governor's office website, I understand, where folks can find some more information. Do you happen to know
Not
the
about the
address?
conference yet, but if they want to find out more about the governor's broader faith-based agenda, they can log on to www.governor.state.tx.us. There's a whole range of materials there, kind of giving the full picture, but really in a succinct form of what the governor's done, kind of under the faith-based umbrella.
Wonderful. I hope that site gets a lot of hits. And I think there was another site that you wanted us to particularly highlight, Susan. It was a resource center that you found helpful?
Center for Public Justice, and it's a www. I gave that to you. Is it
Yeah, it's
CP?
We should have it up on the
CPjustice.org.
screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Because a lot of folks do get their information now online. Another sign of partnership here. Well, we've got a couple of minutes left. So, Susan, what would you say to a faith-based group that might be considering this? How would you encourage them to approach the whole process, partnering in Charitable Choice?
Well, the first thing would be prayer. Another good thing might be to read Amy Sherman's book, Restorers of Hope. She is very even-handed about looking in depth at churches, ministries that are involved in helping people and transforming lives. And she talks about the potential benefits of partnering with government, the pitfalls, and some of the ways to go forward in rectifying some of those pitfalls. Looking at information on the websites, and I think talking together with people. I truly believe that relationships is going to be what makes this happen, that as we talk to each other, learn our city, learn the needs, come together and see what each of us is called to do and equipped to do, that it will make a difference.
I hope so. I hope we've stirred up some good interest and enthusiasm today. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Don, for coming to talk about ways we can reach out to each other from our different perspectives and strengthen our entire community. And thank you for joining us on Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll see you here again next week.